Well, Brian, we're officially in the stretch run here with spring ball at CU. They had their third spring scrimmage on Friday. This one we were not allowed into, so I would imagine this analysis video is going to be a little bit shorter. But Carl Durrell, he made an effort to try to kind of give us some insight into what happened out there, and sounds like the defense got a little bit better of the offense yesterday.
Yeah, which has kind of been a theme this spring. We saw the offense with a couple highlights in the last scrimmage we saw a week earlier, but it really sounds like the defense has just gotten the better of the offense throughout this spring. And you can kind of understand that with the inexperience they have at quarterback and the how depleted they are on the offensive line. But, it certainly sounds like, the defense is playing well throughout the spring.
And Carl Durrell again said, hey, the goal here is youth. It's not, we know what these older guys can do. And it has to be about the youth, because I counted there's 12 returning players that started games during that abbreviated 2020 season that have either missed all of spring ball or a significant portion. And that doesn't even include guys that have moved on, Mustafa Johnson, William Sherman, Katie Nixon, Akil Jones, Darian Rakestraw. So It really is a lot of young guys across the board. Mekhi Blackman, another one that's been out of the mix this spring. I hadn't seen this until you brought it up, but he had an injection to help with his arthritis. I think it was in his knee.
Yep.
So
it looked like it was knee. He did a video that was about 9 minutes long of him in agony over this shot. I've never had one, so I'm not criticizing him at all. I don't know what that feels like, but it was a 9-minute video of him getting the injection. So,
well, shout out to Mekhi. I hope you're doing better today. But sticking with that theme of youth, he mentioned Tyron Taylor, the early enrollee cornerback, had his first pick this spring during 7-on-7 work. His name has actually come up a couple times from the coaching staff. I don't think you expect him to get on the field much this year, but having these 15 practices and just the way, his position coach and Durrell have talked about him, it seems like he's going to be a player down the road.
Yeah, and a couple of years ago, we didn't expect KJ Trujillo to get on the field, and he ended up being a starter for most of the year. So we'll see. I mean, especially if Mekhi's knee is that bothersome, and if it grows into the season, all of a sudden maybe a Tyron Taylor gets on the field and benefits from what he's doing right now. So I think it's huge, the reps he's getting, and with all this youth, if we get these reps right now that they normally wouldn't get, maybe it pays off in week 4, 5, 6 when they have to get in there because there's some injuries.
And sticking with another young guy that Carl Durrell mentioned, he wasn't even asked about Ashad Clayton. He went out of his way to kind of praise how good he's looked as he's gotten more comfortable this spring. He had a nice touchdown run that they had. They sent out a little video clip, and it looked like a pretty nice run that he had yesterday.
Yeah, and Ashad, he said, Coach Durrell said that the more reps he gets, just the faster he gets. He just looks better and more comfortable. And, I know fans love to hear that. I'm sure Ashad loves to hear that last year was frustrating for him. And it sounds like he's doing what he needs to do to get on the field. And that's a crowded running back room, but, Ashad's very talented. So it's going to be interesting to see if everybody's healthy, how they're going to distribute that ball, because you got the Offensive Player of the Year, plus your 2019 leading rusher, plus your top running back recruit in the past decade or whatever, all fighting for carries. And there's also Jay Lee Stacks and Joe Davis. So that's an interesting room in there, but Ashad seems to be having a pretty good spring.
And he's got a lot of big game experience, Robert Barnes, but this has been a huge spring for him as well to get all the reps that he has. He had an interception yesterday. He played safety outside linebacker at Oklahoma. So his first time playing inside linebacker at a new school. This has got to be huge for him. You list the guys that this spring ball has benefited the most. I think he's got to be pretty high on that list. They're bringing in Jack Lamb as well, an inside linebacker from Notre Dame, but you got to think Barnes is going to have a pretty big leg up just based on being on campus this spring.
Yeah, I think so. And, I was asked this recently, who's going to be the most impactful or how are these transfers going to impact the team? I've got to say Robert Barnes is going to be the most impactful transfer, don't you think? I mean,
probably,
I think some of these,
yeah. I mean, unless JT Stroud is your starting quarterback, of course.
Yeah, that's true. Certainly, if he's the starting quarterback, that'll be bigger. But with Jack Lamb, I mean, I don't know how good he is. We'll see. He's certainly going to be behind not being here in spring. They're bringing in some offensive linemen that might get a chance to get in there and play and help with some depth. But I just feel like Robert Barnes is trending towards being a starter or a fairly significant player on that defense, whether it's inside linebacker, a star, or whatever he does. It feels like he's trending to be on the field a lot.
Didn't sound like the receivers had the best day yesterday,
Yeah.
huh? Carl Durrell even said no receiver stood out. Was pretty quick to move on past that position group. But he said Matt Lynch had a couple nice grabs there. He said all the backs ran well. But, again, it just seems like, they installed this new 2-minute, and it just, again, offense is such a rhythm deal that I guess you don't push the panic alarm yet in terms of the offense, but is there concern there?
Yeah, he mentioned drop passes in that 2-minute drill. It was not a glowing report for the passing game in general. He said the quarterbacks had mixed results. And really, I mean, we got to see the first 2 scrimmages at him. And I know the first one was, 20, 25 plays. But, Lewis and Strout, neither one of them really stood out in that. I think both of them threw an interception. The second one, Strout looked pretty good at times. But, Lewis was a little shaky. And then yesterday after the third one, Carl Durrell says that has mixed results with the quarterback. So it doesn't sound like, and from what we've seen from a couple of practices, that anybody's really emerging at quarterback to where you feel, all right, we've got a legitimate starting guy here. So I guess if you're Sam Neuer saying, this is still my job to lose, nobody's gone out there and seized this job from what it sounds like. So we'll see at the spring game. That's the last sort of dress rehearsal for the fall, but it doesn't sound like quarterback is really settling itself at all this spring.
Carl Durrell was asked about Naeem Rodman. That's a name we've heard come up a little bit in terms of guys that have stood out this spring, and Durrell kind of confirmed some of those things we heard. It seems like he might be kind of in line for a starting job with Mustafa Johnson moving on. Isn't that what you've kind of gathered? But I mean, obviously we're a ways off here. He also did bring up Justin Jackson and Janez Jordan as well. But Naeem, we thought last year was going to be kind of a breakout year for him, at least in terms of being a heavy rotation guy. Didn't really see a bunch of them, but it sounds like he's steadily gotten better as well.
Yeah, I think this could be his breakout year. Whether he starts or not, I think he's going to be one of those top 4 linemen. I still think that it sounds like they really like Janez Jordan. Jalen Sami, has been a starter. He's got some experience. He's the old guy in the group, even though he's still technically a sophomore. And Terrence Lang, when he's healthy, I imagine is going to be on the field a lot. So I still look at Naeem as maybe that number 4 defensive lineman, but I think he's going to play a lot, and whether he's a starter or not, we'll see. But I kind of think he could be one of those breakout guys on the defense. Sounds like he's ready to take that jump.
We got a chance to talk to Jalen Sami. I think it was Neil Welk that, kind of brought up, hey, you're still a sophomore, but you got to feel like an old guy at this point. And yeah, you start to do the math. Sami, he gray-shirted, red-shirted, and he's part of a 2017 recruiting class that had guys like Katie Nixon, Laviska Shenault, Will Sherman, James Stefano. It is crazy, how the clock getting stopped in 2020, and then if a guy gray shirts, like just how different their eligibility is right now.
Yeah, he graduated high school 4 years ago, and he's still got 3 years he can play in college football. So, he could be around a while. I imagine he's not around that long because I think he's got NFL type of ability to at least give it a shot here. But yeah, he's still technically a sophomore. It's crazy. He hasn't played a ton of football yet. He started, throughout his career, but last year was a half a year. The previous year he was injured a little bit. So he's still got a lot of football in him, but he's an old guy. I mean, was Terrence Lang in that 2017 class as well?
He was. Yep.
He was. Okay. So they both, Lang's been here longer, but they were both graduated obviously at the same time. So, but Sami's got, it's crazy. He's got 3 years left.
We also got a chance to talk to one of our favorites, tight end Brady Russell. He revealed that it's been 6 years since he last had his hair cut. You asked him about that, and one of the better lines, he said, I don't think it's a competition. Speaking of who has the longest hair on the team, he said, I think it's all love from one long-haired brother to another.
And Brady Russell's he's always good for a quote. I think that goes down on my list for some of the better quotes of the spring. I still think Coach Rodrigue might have it with the Ashad Clayton Dirty Bowls quote about not bringing the bowls back. So, but yeah, Brady Russell, he's a fun guy. It was interesting watching him last year as he was hurt. He's out there dancing. He's a fun-loving guy. I think his teammates like him a lot, and it sounds like he's getting healthy and still has that long hair. And we'll see. As long as he's got that long hair, he's not cutting it. I think he's going to be a good player here for the Buffs. You don't want to see him cut that hair while he's here, though.
Yeah, if you've committed to something for 6 years, you got to keep it going. So
yeah, you have to do that. I mean, I'd be curious to see how long Kari Kutch and John Van Diest have committed to that long hair, but you'd be hard pressed to find someone that's gone 6 years committing to that type of hair.
And he also mentioned, hey, that injury, I kind of put things in perspective. He is a guy that is so dedicated to the game of football. He was one of the guys during the shutdown that was being really innovative with his workouts, just such a hard worker. But yeah, when you're hurt and you can't be out there competing, it does put things in perspective. And so it was cool to hear him talk about that as well.
Yeah. And I know he's a pretty religious guy. Earlier this spring, he actually got some guys on the team, including Nate Lamon, to get baptized into the church that he goes to. So it put perspective in for him. I think that sometimes that's a good thing for guys to get an injury and kind of refocus a little bit. And it sounds like that's happened for Brady. You never want to see guys get hurt, obviously, but it sounds like maybe that happened for Brady, and he'll have that renewed focus once he gets back to full speed. It sounds like he's okay from what I'm gathering, but they just don't want to push him, and there's no need to really throw him into scrimmages right now when really it is all about the young guys, as we mentioned. So it sounds like he could go into scrimmages if they wanted him to, but there's really no need.
One other interesting comment he made, just talking about the differences between Brian Cook and Taylor Embry, the last 2 of 4 tight ends coaches that he's had at CU. And he said that Taylor Embry's emphasis was on, hey, know your job and do it really well, but you didn't necessarily need to know everything else that was going on offense. Whereas Brian Cook, coming over as a quality control coach, he wants these tight ends to see the big picture. That takes a little bit more time. I think that might help kind of separate some of these guys in the tight end room. It maybe makes you think that, a more experienced guy like a Matt Lynch is going to have a leg up over some of these younger, talented tight ends, just because he'll probably be able to grasp the bigger picture quicker.
Yeah, especially, Matt Lynch being a former quarterback. And he mentioned to us recently when we talked to him that because of that, he feels like he knows the whole offense really well. I'm interested, we'll never know, but I'm curious if kind of that difference in philosophy, if Taylor Embry would have gotten to that whole team philosophy, if maybe he started off first year, just know your job. Let's do the best we can within these 6 games, know your job. And perhaps Taylor would have gotten to that. So maybe it's just different perspective because it's a different year. But it is interesting to see those different – I mean, every one of these guys on this team, Adam, it's so interesting. They've all had various position coaches. I think the only group that hasn't, I guess, receiver and running back.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, everybody else has had 2 or 3 different position coaches throughout their time here. So, in some ways, that's benefited these guys. But you're right. I think that the veteran guys, the guys that grasp the entire offense, are going to be the ones who play.
Laviska Shenault was on campus. I would imagine he's hanging out in Boulder this weekend. Always good to see him come back there. Carl Durrell mentioned, hey, we love having these guys around. You have to open up your arms. I know Dan Hawkins, his downfall started when he just was not that receptive to former Buffs, and it really angered, that group. And so you've got to embrace those guys. And so it's cool that Durrell has that philosophy. And I think it helps that he's been at CU before and he understands, some of the history of this program.
Yeah, I think that helps. Obviously Hawkins was followed by John Embry, who, went the total opposite way. He being a former Buff. It seems like things have been a lot better on that regard over the last decade or so since Hawkins was here. So, but yeah, Laviska being here, probably a really good thing. I mean, he played with a lot of these guys on this team. We mentioned some of them that were in his class, but also his brother is still here. And so I imagine for Levante, that was a really good thing because he gets here, he's got Laviska here, he's got Katie Nixon, guys he grew up with, and they've both moved on. So maybe that was a good thing for Levante to, be able to kind of connect with his brother a little bit, for however long Lavisca's here. But always good to see those old guys coming back.
Just 2 more spring practices, Monday, Wednesday, and then Friday will be the spring showcase. They're thin in a lot of spots. I think you got to set your expectations low for the entertainment factor, but looking forward, you and I will get a chance to go in the press box for the first time since this past season. So that'll be great.
Yeah. Last time we were there, it was a snowy day against Utah. So it'll be nice to be back there and get a chance to see these young guys. And yeah, I don't think we're not going to see the team that's going to play in the fall, but we're going to see a lot of guys that this is kind of the case every spring, maybe more so this year. We're going to see a lot of guys that might make an impact in 2022, 2023, not necessarily this fall. But it'll be good to see some of those young guys and just see kind of how they're developing.
All right, we'll be back with more analysis during the final week of spring ball.